gender-based violence that result in or is likely to result in a physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. Domestic violence must be addressed as a public health concern, and not only as a privatized, individualized problem. The ways in which gender violence is based on and reinforced through women's wider structural inequality and lack of power in relation to men needs to be recognized if violence with the domestic sphere is to be tackled effectively. Based on the National Strategy on Protection Against Domestic Violence and Violence Against Women, raising awareness about the different forms of violence against women and domestic violence is an important element in preventing violence, because increased awareness is the first step towards changing attitudes and behaviors that encourage or allow different forms of violence against women. To this end, the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, Istanbul Convention, requires state parties to undertake extensive awareness-raising initiatives as part of a series of measures aimed at prevent violence against women. Education is very important in the fight against violence, especially when it comes to prevention. When women are educated, they have the power to follow the laws that protect them. They can advocate for their education with more than just their own opinion. When they get an education, they have more opinions to make a living, contribute to the family income, and they spread their newly acquired knowledge through the family and community. Gender-based violence experts conclude education is the best antidote to domestic violence, especially violence against women. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence by the time they are adults. Obviously, people need to learn skills to recognize and avoid domestic violence from a very young age. By providing education in school about topics related to domestic violence, schools can help prevent incidents and create a culture where aggression and control of intimate partners is no longer such a common behavior in our society. As for Kosovo, from 2016 to 2021, there are over 10,000 cases of domestic violence. The total number of victims of violence for the same period is 7,654 women, or 80.2%, and 1,887 men, or 19.8%. The report cases of domestic violence in Kosovo police are 11,708, of them 11,504 were women and 2,257 were men, according to the gender affiliation of the reporters. Understanding the approach to take in domestic violence education is a matter of understanding the difference between prevention and intervention. The key difference is prevention happens before exposure to domestic violence, while intervention seeks to address existing cases of domestic violence in the student's relationship, either at school or at home. Prevention efforts include awareness programming and general education to all students on the dynamic of interpersonal violence, consent, and other forms of abuse within a relationship. All students at all ages should receive information and awareness programming, because even they are never a victim or a perpetrator of domestic violence, chances that they may become a bystander or witness. Students should know how to recognize signs of abusive and harmful interaction with others at a very early age. Intervention, on the other hand, refers to a more individualized treatment program to assist students who are either victims or perpetrators already, either in their own relationship or others in their family. The adverse psychological, sexual, and reproductive health consequences affect women at all stages of their life. For example, early sex education disadvantages not only represent the primary obstacles to universal schooling and the right to education for girls, done to the line, they are also to blame for restricting access to higher education and even translate into limited opportunities for women in the labor market. Violence against women continues to be an obstacle to achieving equality, development, peace, as well as to the fulfillment of women and girls' human rights. All in all, the promise of sustainable development goals to leave no one behind cannot be fulfilled without putting an end to violence against women and girls. Gender-based violence is a threat to comprehensive security, with at least 1 in 3 women surviving some form of violence in their lifetime. Violence increases in times of conflict and crisis and has lifelong consequences for women affected by it, as well as their families and communities. Here at the UBT, we will always promote the causes for goodwill. We take into account the respectful for supporting such causes, so the 16 days of activism have an utmost importance to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Rector. And one of our guests today is also the ambassador of Sweden to Kosovo, Mr. Jonas Westerlund. We are very honored to have you here today, Mr. Westerlund, and the floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure being here. I started my assignment in mid-August, but I was also here 25 years ago. I spent 2 years in Vukovar in Croatia, working for the United Nations. I was also here during, or rather after the conflict here in Kosovo in 99. I was here for some months in 99, during the spring and the summer, to build up the OC mission. I have a formal speech. Let me just go into two stories from my life before I begin in my formal speech, if you allow me. The first one is really when I was a student at an American university in Paris, France. And this is just an illustration that we Swedes, and particularly myself, are very strong advocates for gender equality. And I remember as a student, we were having a lesson in press conference technique, a typical American way, American approach. We wouldn't have that in Swedish universities, but at this American university, we had a lesson in how to deal with press conferences. And I remember it was my Canadian friend who was practicing in this. And if I remember this correctly, his topic that he selected was that he was supposed to defend the Canadian Air Force in the Balkans. I think the Canadian pilots and the Air Force had bombarded some of the villages in Bosnia, and he was then supposed to defend this during a press conference technique. The other students, we all came up with questions, tough questions. My question was really in the middle of the whole sort of scenario of this press conference. Why doesn't Canada have any female pilots? And he could not respond. He became very silent, and he could not respond to that. And he got a very low grade during this press conference scenario because of that. And he will never forget me for asking that question. The other issue I just wanted to mention before my formal speech is that I was heading the Swedish evacuation at the Kabul airport last summer. You may have seen this on television when many of the Afghans wanted to leave Afghanistan after the Taliban took over, and you had tens of thousands of Afghans standing outside the airport trying to get inside the airport, and I was sent there to lead the Swedish evacuation of this. I had contact with the Swedish foreign minister, of course, throughout these 8 days at the Kabul airport, we managed to save 1,400 people from the Swedish perspective. Of course, there were more than 10,000 people saved overall and evacuated from the airport. My point here is that Sweden had a particular event to try to evacuate Swedish feminists, Afghan feminists, from the airport. That was my clear instructions from the Swedish foreign minister. It was particularly an NGO called Skateistan. That is a NGO, believe it or not, focused on skateboarders. And the whole approach was really a feminist approach to focus on having female skateboarders to organize a civil society in Afghanistan. So all the managers in this NGO were all females. So my task was to save all of them from Afghanistan, and I was called up on a Wednesday. That was probably my fifth day during the 8 days at the Kabul airport. They were around 30, plus families 60s, and within a few hours we managed to save literally all of them during this day, and they're now living happily in Sweden. So that's, once again, just an illustration how much we focus on the gender equality, and also very hands-on. Since this is a 16 days of activism, that was one way of really trying to save, to rescue a number of feminist activists in Afghanistan. If you bear with me, then I will start my formal speech. Violence against women and girls remains the most pervasive human rights violation around the world, already heightened by the COVID pandemic. Its prevalence is now being further increased by the intersecting crisis of climate change, global conflict, and economic instability. Against this setting, a backlash against women's rights is underway around the world. Anti-feminist movements are on the rise, attacks against women, human rights defenders and activists are up, and the legal status of women's rights is increasingly imperiled in many countries. Regressive new laws are exacerbating impunity for perpetrators of domestic violence. Governments are using force against gender-based protesters. Women's rights organizations are being increasingly marginalized in many countries. So that's the setting at the moment, according to the Swedish view. A new study by the UN Women shows that on average, more than 5 women or girls were killed every hour by someone in their own family in 2021. Let me repeat that. More than 5 women or girls were killed every hour by someone in their own family during the year of 2021. So that's the reality today. Despite these discouraging trends, there's more proof than ever that violence against women and girls is preventable. And that is really the Swedish approach to this. It must be prevented with a combination of early identification of women affected by violence, access to survivor-centered support and protection, ensuring that police and justice systems are more responsive to the needs of survivors, and primary prevention by addressing the root causes of violence against women and girls. We must also eliminate structural gender inequalities and gender stereotypes. Evidence shows that the most single important driver of policy change is a strong and autonomous women's movement. making feminist mobilization in the face of anti-rights backlash a literal matter of life and death. Enhancing gender equality and the contribution of women to peace and security has for long been a top priority for the Swedish government. Promoting gender equality not only means promoting economic, political and social empowerment of women, it also means promoting development and conflict prevention. The overarching Swedish principle is that everyone, regardless of gender, has the right to work and support themselves, to balance career and family life, and to live without a fear of abuse or violence. Gender equality implies not only equal distribution between men and women in all domains of society, it's also about the qualitative aspects, ensuring that the knowledge and experience of both men and women are used to promote progress in all aspects of society. Now, let me mention just three highlights on this. Women's participation leads to more sustainable peace. That is a matter of fact. You can see that in a lot of mediation processes, for example, where you have more women, you have more sustainable peace. This is on various levels, of course. It could be, like I said, on a mediation, but it's also on the institutional level, on a family level. But we can clearly see that on a level of mediation. In many of the mediation processes that the UN has analyzed, there are only around 15% of women participating in these mediation processes. And only 9% of the women are signatories to peace processes. And that is not just about gender equality, it's about sustainable peace in the end. The second point is that we really have to focus on gender-based violence is a core security challenge. It's also being used as a human rights violation in Ukraine, for example, right now. So that has to be acknowledged. That's a method of warfare from the Russian side against Ukraine. Now, the third issue is, and I mentioned that before, is the lack or uneven distribution of resources. That is at the very core of inequality as well. We need to have a more thorough analysis on how resources are allocated and to whom. To achieve real change, political commitment needs to be accompanied by sustainable financing. So that's the approach of Sweden. What are we doing here in Kosovo? We are providing development support to Kosovo with around 30 million euros per year. So part of a 7-year program. We focus very much on human rights and democracy, peaceful and inclusive societies, environment, and fourthly and lastly, economic development. But throughout these 4 priorities, we always have the general angle in all of these four priorities. That is a top priority that we mention all the time. I mention it all the time in my discussions when I meet governors, when I meet ministers. In the development support here in Kosovo, we focus very much on reducing gender discrimination, strengthening women's economic empowerment, and support women human rights defenders, increasing women's influence and participation in the political process. We have been working quite closely with UN Women here, and we have been focusing on going into what we call the transformative financing for gender equality in the Western Balkans. That's where we're really working with a number of municipalities in all of the Balkans, but here in Kosovo with 16 municipalities to do gender budgeting. That is, we're focusing really on going really into the details here, and that to see that the municipality needs to change even the budgeting to focus much more on women. It's been quite successful, I must say, in that. When it comes to peaceful, inclusive societies, one of the 4 priorities that I mentioned before, We want to address the root causes of conflicts, contributing to conflict resolution, increasing resilience to conflict, and priority will be given to reducing levels of violence, including gender-based violence. Let me conclude by mentioning the most important thing here, and that's the sort of prevention. Violence against women and girls remains the most pervasive human rights violation around the world. Many of the responses to date to violence against women have focused primarily on intervening with affected individuals after the violence has occurred. Such strategies are essential to mitigate the devastating mental, physical, social, and economic effect for women experience violence, ensure justice and accountability, and prevent its recurrence. It's important to continue to improve these responses. At the same time, there's also an increasing need to address the broader factors that contribute to the prevalence at the population level and to implement programs that prevent such violence from occurring in the first place. We have made such a progress over the last years in improving the laws that distinguish these acts and others as ones of violence and invasion of human rights. This has been important. However, on their own, they have not been enough to change the daily experiences of girls and women, or indeed those of boys and men. They have not yet changed the way that people think and behave. In public spaces, in private homes, in office environments, in schools, on buses and trains, in refugee camps, online and in cyberspace. So what we want to do is really to focus very much on prevention, to change the culture and the attitude. We want to foster a sense of responsibility. We want to prevent violence before it happens or reoccurs. That means that our work has to demonstrate and teach what inequality is and how its continued existence is preventing progress in all fields. We know that community mobilization, group intervention for both women and men, educational programs, empowerment of women are some of the interventions that have impact. With this said, I look forward to have some fruitful discussions and questions from the audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dear Mr. Ambassador. And since Ms. Blerinda Idrizi, the expert of public policies and gender policies, is going to have its own session starting from 11:30, we're going now directly to the part of the discussion with the rector and the ambassador. So first I'm going to start with a question for the rector, since we are here at the UBT. And UBT has one of its values, the fact that a large number of girls and women study here. So how did you manage to have such a friendly environment for girls and women students? And it should be also noted that the large number of not only students, but also academic and administrative staff consists of women and girls. So what is that distinguishes you from other universities as UBT?
I think the UBT is now more than 20 years active in Kosovo and is represented as an institution with organic growth. And this organic growth is as an organic participation of girls in studies and as women and girls in the work. So because based on their own willingness, proactiveness, smartness, and everything that can attribute to them, we are really happy to have, let's say, almost more than 50% of students female genders, and taking consideration that we are very much on STEM-based education, so engineering, technology, and different science aspects, which was not typically women-based, let's say, with the number of education, we have increased there. And let's say in computer science, which is the largest school in the Western Balkan, we have more women than men. So this is really great. We see this is a very good trends. I think Kosovo has a culture for education. People are like to study and to educate the family members and so on. And I think in this framework we have also this those results within the UBT. From the perspective of employees, we have for the moment 1,300 full-time staff, and 42% are women. So I think it's quite, again, not enough, but I mean it's quite in a good direction. It's not just a policy for us to have women, but it's based on merits. And this is, I think, this organic growth to make us very happy to show those interaction and to see these results and to show if we compare maybe with some private institution or other institution on public or private based. Of course, we are trying to work very much on this SDG-based components, so sustainable development. We are working very hard. We have a strategy for sustainability. Even we have been, we applied for ranking. This is a ranking for university called Impact Ranking, and we succeed last year to be in the top 500 best universities, and #1 in the region of Western Balkan, which as of the area where gender issues are placed, we have a very good positioning in this part. So it's also something that we understand, we have in our focus, and we wanted to move. So another place, of course, we are trying to put different function within the UBT ecosystem with counseling centers, with different aspects where we can promote. We will sign with UN Women on 6th of December let's say the declaration where we will be member of the global activism on this direction, and we have as a sign and be member of different action where as a women, like women on entrepreneurship, on STEM, on robotics, and many other aspects are places. And I think the Faculty of Law and Psychology and Security and Social Sciences, they are also taking care very much with their own departments and the courses related with this. So this is, let's say, our ecosystem where we try to capturing those things, and I think we move forward. And as I said before, this is really very important, and we will work much more in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you, dear Active. I'm having now a question for the ambassador. How do you think, Mr. Ambassador, Kosovo can learn from Sweden's system related to gender-based violence?
Thank you for the question. Well, above all, I think it's a long road, right? But I think the most important thing is to change the whole society. You have to change the attitude in the whole society. You need to have gender equality in the parliament. You need to have gender equality among the ministers. You need to have gender equality among the top positions in the private sector. So you need to do a whole change of factors. I'm not saying that you don't have it, but in general, when you change a country where there is no gender equality, that's what you need to aim for. It's a long road, but you will need to start that as soon as possible. I think you have come quite far in Kosovo, but to reach to the Scandinavian level, I'm afraid that you need to speed up a little bit this. More concretely, I mean, Sweden nowadays, you have specific police task forces that are dealing with domestic violence against women in virtually all municipalities in Sweden. That's one sort of concrete way or focusing on domestic violence. And then, as I said in my speech, the third and last point is really to focus on prevention and to have a strong civil society and to have debates and, like I said, to change the attitude in the society. Thank you.
Actually, I do have another question for you, dear Ambassador. Maybe just for the mic, okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
keep that.
It's gonna be at you. So what do you think like are the main issues that we in Kosovo have when talking about gender-based violence? And what do you think is the best solution in preventing violence in Kosovo, but also in general?
Well, I partially answered that, I guess, but let me go into that again a little bit. I think the best thing would be for Kosovo to have a even stronger civil society based on gender equality, and to focus on the prevention of domestic violence. That would be my strongest recommendation, and to have a debate about this, and to focus on the statistics. And to really highlight this in debate, what's ongoing in the society. That is my strongest recommendation. Thank you.
And this might be also a question for both of you, like how can students help the cause, and how do you think they can advocate about the cause? That question for both of you.
Please.
Well, the most important thing will be for the students themselves to organize activities, to have a strong activism about gender equality, and to prevent domestic violence, to have that debate in an academic setting. That's, of course, very important. And for all students to participate in the civil society outside the university.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think I've just confirmed what Ambassador said. First of all, the university is a place where intellectual critical thinking is kind of responsibility of, and as a gender equality is a responsibility of society when we see all those trends and issues, and we have to act in different levels. And of course, students are the main stakeholders of universities. Awareness, learning, being proactive within their organization here, and then of course be active also in the society, as you said, in civil society. But as within the university, the voice of students, it was always in Kosovo the students, the revolutionary approach, the right positioning in different cases, and I think this is also what we expected. And as far as I know, there is a proactiveness of young students today about the gender equality, but it should be more stronger. And as I said, when we see statistics, when we see news, so we are not so happy. So we have to do much more, and even more with more focus, let's say, on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to the part of the discussions, and I see that I have a rising hand, so yeah, just someone to help me with the mic. If you can just stand up just to do the question so we can see you.
I have a question for the rector. Since UBD, in addition of being a university, we spend most of our time here in this place, and as our second home. So have you ever had a request from any students for being subjected of violence in family or elsewhere?
Just the microphone for this rector.
As I said before, we have used some best practices internationally to establish the, different systems within the university. One of those that we have already made the focus is the counseling center, which was the first established in Kosovo. And this center is working daily here and the campuses, and their responsibility is exact to identify and to talk and to support students of different issues. So as of the stress for examinations, as for exams, but as issues in their own private life in order to support. And this is what they do. Of course, we have in different mentorship with the staff and students, with the deans and staff. Students are talking sometimes for private issues, including the violence and so on, and we try to consider through this center. So I think not very directly, but yes, we are promoting this, and we try to increase this culture for awareness and proactiveness. The students should talk. Students should show, because as they report or represent or talk or something, so I think we can also take more actions, and we can reflect on this much more. But we try to consider that as of those debates like today and discussion and education itself, it's a kind of providing action for it. I think the voice of people and women, it's important. We have also professors here from psychology who are with us, and maybe they can tell us much more in this direction. The next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rector. I saw another raising hand. Oh, it's just, okay.
I have a question for the ambassador. In our country, it has happened that very low punishments are given to people who have used violence. Is this the same in Sweden?
Can you repeat again, just?
People, the perpetrators of crime have received very low levels of punishment.
Okay, right, okay.
Is this the same phenomenon in Sweden, or rather different?
Okay. Right. Well, thank you for the question. It has changed. It's also been a long road always also on this particular matter. But it has changed for the past 20, 30 years. So, but in I have great confidence in the Swedish judicial system in all matters. But in my personal opinion, they are still too low, I would say. There are many cases where you will get only punishment for perhaps, I don't know, 2-3 months when you have done domestic violence against women, for example. So it's still too low, I would say. That's my personal opinion. But it is a positive change for the past 2 decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have the professor.
I have one question related with this. I'm interested to know about gender equality. Why, for example, Finland, Norway, and Denmark stand better than you in this situation? What problems you have comparison with Scandinavian places in your region?
Thank you for the question. I think we're all proudly Nordic representatives, and that we have a very strong focus, as I said in my speech, on gender equality. I stand to be corrected, but I'm not sure that Sweden has necessarily lower figures. We do? Okay, then I always believe a professor, of course. So, well, I'm a bit saddened to hear that. I am not sure what I can respond to that. We are one factor could be, of course, that we have seen higher criminality in Sweden for the past number of years, and that could, of course, also affect the numbers when it comes to domestic violence, if this is true. Yes, yes, you may add. You can save me here now.
Yes. Well, statistics are very peculiar. And the way how countries record domestic violence or violence against women, whoever deals with public policy does know that we don't have a common platform or a common elements. There are certain commonalities, but each country records violence against women in a different way. So when you read the statistics, you shouldn't be reading just the numbers, but how the statistics were gathered, what is the methodology behind them. Because for Sweden to have high levels of violence against women, which means that they are reporting it, but how they are classifying it means that they go into much further, probably, details than Denmark and Norway both countries are going. So it's a matter of how the data are being recorded based on what methodology. But definitely all Nordic countries are on the top chart for better reporting, better recording, and I mean, Sweden is the country and the donor who has supported Kosovo for the past 22 years from the inception of the Agency of Statistics. And this is one of those donors who have never let down any institution, in my own experience. And usually what you see with donors is after the 5th year of the